Now welcome to family debate section in Japan US Debate 2017. So we have opening government, Prime Minister Daiki and Lucas. So opening operation we have Tomi and Ayano. Closing government we have Fu and Arar. And closing operation we have Naoya and Arisa. So motion of today's debate is the subject from refugees' citizenship. So first of all, I would welcome Prime Minister speech to open case within 2 minutes. They have.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So you might think that if we if we grant refugees citizenship, then they will commit a crime in that country and they will make the society dangerous. However, we believe that in our paradigm we can protect security of citizens in a much better way, and also the human right of refugees can uniquely be protected in our paradigm. So that's why we are very proud to propose this motion. So I have two arguments. So firstly, I will talk about how we can protect refugees' life if we take this plan. And secondly, I will talk about why we can protect security of citizens in a better way in our paradigm. So, but before that, I will set up a model of this motion. So before we grant refugees citizenship, we have to receive it. So we will check, we will check, if possible, we will check their criminal records to make sure that they're not like the criminal. Yeah. So moving on to my first argument about how much refugees are suffering in the status quo and how that will improve after taking this plan.
To clarify.
So, yes.
So you're saying that your only standard is to check the criminal record. So about how many people are you letting into, I assume, the country of Japan per year?
It's 10,000. Yeah, I will not mention about exact number, but yeah. We just grant them the citizenship. Yeah. So first about how much the life of refugees can be improved after taking this plan. So in the status quo, refugees do not have citizenship. So it means that they do not have access to schools or hospitals or that kind of public service. So it is, and also, since they do not have citizenship, it's very hard for them to get a job. So in that case, they cannot earn enough money to support their life. So they will continue to suffer from poverty even if they move to other country. Then, even if they suffer from disease, because of the poverty, they do not have enough money to go to hospital, and they are not allowed to use welfare system. So they will face many difficulties if they go to other country as a refugee. However, after taking this plan, since they have citizenship, then they have access to school or hospital or public service. So we believe that, for example, children of refugees will be well educated in that country. In that case, they have much more possibility to get a good job, and if they can earn enough money, to support their family, then they do not have to suffer from poverty anymore. So that's how the life of refugees will be improved after taking this plan. So secondly, I will talk about why we can protect security of citizens in a better way in our paradigm. So the opposition side might argue that if we grant refugees citizenship, then they will commit a crime and the society will be unsafe. However, so I will explain why the situation will be better for two reasons. So firstly, so why do refugees commit a crime in the first place? It's because they cannot earn enough money to support their life, and they have to rob something to eat or rob something to drink in order to survive. And also, since they are under great stress, they will kill people, or they will commit a crime in order to release their stress. But however, after taking this plan, the refugees will it's much easier for refugees to get a job, and they can support their life, so they do not have to commit a crime to survive. So, and the second reason is that some refugees come from regions where they have conflict, and also so for example, some refugees come from a country where ISIS are active. So if we don't accept them as a refugees, then we have much more potential members for ISIS. So it means that if the refugees join the ISIS, then it will be much more difficult for us to control them and weaken the power of ISIS. However, if we take this plan, then we can the potential member for ISIS will decrease, and that means the strength of ISIS will also weaken. So we can have the security of the country will be protected. So for these two reasons, we believe that we can protect security of citizens in much better way. So, so if we grant refugees citizenship, then they do not have to suffer from poverty anymore, because it's much easier for them to get a job, and they can earn enough money, which will prevent criminal in that country. And that's why we are very proud to propose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I will work on data operation to verify citizen minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So today, well, the Prime Minister didn't say much about their model, right? Well, I would like to first try and tell you something about their model, which is kind of fishy. And then I would like to move on to what is wrong with their side and what we are going to say about their side. And then we're going to tell you two arguments, which is mainly argument one, just giving citizenship doesn't solve anything at all to begin with.
Yeah.
And argument two, we do need social security for reasons, and there are reasons why other countries are not taking in refugees that readily. So, first of all, I'll tell you something about their model, right? So first, about their model, their workability have a lot of problems to begin with, right? They only check criminal records. Well, one, does it tell anything about themselves, about those citizens? Because as far as I know, that those terror that happened in England, Germany, France, and Iran, they didn't really have those kind of records to begin with. Not all of them have those records, right? And also, in their workability, you cannot really tell whether you'll be giving those refugees instant citizenship, or you will give the future people citizenship, or you will give every single person who comes a citizenship, right? In that kind of case, are we going to say that, oh, Japan is going to give citizenship, then are they going to give citizenship to every single person in Japan, plus people who will come to Japan, right? So we cannot tell anything about that, which is very harmful and very, very dangerous for Japan to begin with. And that is why I want to say very clearly, today's debate is not only about refugees, that it is about the citizens living in that certain country, and it is about the sustainability of that country, and finally, refugees, right? So refugees cannot come first because the sustainability and the citizens are more important for the country, and that is why we simply oppose this motion. So, so moving on to the rebuttal quickly, they said something like this, right? Much easier to get a job. They have a better chance. But what they didn't prove to you at all is by far how much will they get those kind of chances, right? I will try to integrate this rebuttal in my first argument. So, moving on, my first argument is that just giving citizenship doesn't solve anything at all, right? So what do I mean by that? In the short term, at the very least, government need more taxes for those people who are going to be a citizen, whether they will be getting the citizenship instantly or not, right? And for those who will be getting it in the future. In that kind of case, where will the tax come from? Obviously from the people who are already working very, very hard, the normal citizens, the ordinary citizens, right? But we all know that the tax is limited. In that kind of case, what will happen? Obviously, there are going to be less tax provided for ordinary citizens on average, and that includes things like welfare or transportation or those kind of public services that ordinary people who have the legitimate right to get one, they will be receiving less and less as far as I can tell. No, thank you. And about the unemployment part, I want to say that if refugees come without a job, then they're just gonna be another unemployed, who just take public welfare, who just take those kind of hospital or medicine kind of care or something like that, just those kind of welfare, they'll get it for free, right? In that kind of case, can we simply say that even though they have no contribution on those taxes, even though that they're just eating up those taxes coming from those people who worked very, very hard, can we try and justify those kind of things just because they are refugees? We cannot really accept the fact that they can just simply become a citizen in one day, and they can just take away some ordinary people's tax and those kind of benefits, right? Yes.
I just want to make this debate clear. Are you opposing the refugees themselves, or are you opposing the refugees to get a citizenship?
I'm obviously trying to not have these refugees get these kind of citizenships so fast, and that is one thing. And another thing, we are trying to oppose the fact that they're going to come in so much at a time, right? So we're trying to say, we do understand the fact that refugees, maybe they don't have skills, maybe they cannot speak at all of those certain languages, maybe they don't have money, they don't have a place to go, but still, it doesn't change the fact that a nation will be in danger just because of the fact that we give a citizenship, right? Why can't we just let them use their skills, or why can't we just let them try and come to this country to be competitive just like other citizens, right? Well, in the first place, they didn't have those kind of rights to have the same rights with the normal citizens anyway. So the government side obviously need to somehow justify the fact that these refugees need to have the same rights as the ordinary citizens that already existed, and they have to somehow solve the problem of this tax problems and unemployed problems that already exist in the current status quo, that unless this problem is solved, the government is obviously going to be in trouble, and then we cannot really see much of our future, right? So moving on to the second argument about social security, we believe that already in the current status quo, like I mentioned, many countries are suffering from terrorism, right? And even without those terrorism, many people in EU, many countries in EU already suffering from flooding in those refugee camps, those refugees who doesn't have anything to eat, who doesn't have a job. They are just occupying those spaces where they cannot find themselves a place to go anyway. In that kind of case where the government doesn't have any plan at the moment, like our Prime Minister, in that kind of case, what can we expect the refugees can do, right? Unless the government tries to guide them step by step or something, or slowly, bit by bit, where they can adjust to a certain place and then get a citizenship, we cannot really justify, or we cannot really say that these refugees will survive anyway. So what is the point in giving them citizenship straight away, right? And moving on, after that, we want to say just quickly that there will be two possible conflicts that will arise that the government has to somehow solve, is that the government and the original citizens will have a conflict to begin with, because obviously the original citizens have some kind of social norm about this terrorism or this anxiety that these refugees will bring. In that kind of case, obviously the original citizens will not want these kind of people to come, right? Then the government have to try and bring out a feasible solution to this, otherwise they will not stand in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech. Excited to welcome Deputy Prime Minister to your speech for this.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen in this House. So, in this debate, we believe, as both government and opposition, we believe we're talking about that because we're in the presumption that all those refugees, they're already coming to our country, and then we're talking about whether or not to give them a citizenship or not. That's why we believe the government side has already failed, because they misunderstood the context we're going to talk about. And then I'd like to make an analogy before I start my argument, which is, would you like to have a friend sleep over for one night or 2 nights because they're homeless temporarily, and then we take them in and they can sleep over. We help them through the difficulties, and then they can go back home. They can go back home and they can live a better life. So as in this sense, we believe taking refugees in is a social responsibilities of those developed country or richer country to help those refugees. And we believe some of them will go back to our country, and some of them will become a rightful or decent citizen of our country, which will contribute to our society in terms of financial, economic, and culture, and maybe politics, because we have new blood in our countries. So, with that being said, I would like to point out some. First, I'd like to make some rebuttals concerning the government speech, and then I'd like to reconstruct our model, and then I'd like to talk about 2 things, which is about the first security issue, and then I'd like to tell you about why it is good both to the citizens already the citizens in our country, and the refugees, and to our country generally. So first about, I'd like to clarify, I have some rebuttals to make. The first is about that that they're talking about that if we gave them such kind of like citizenship, they will still harm because of the security problem. But as I just mentioned, we have in this debate the presumption currently that they are already they are already in our country, and we are facing like two options: should we give them the citizenship or not? In this sense, we believe giving them a citizenship is better, and I'll tell you why in my later speech. And also, they talk about like the EU, like we have like huge many refugee camps, and this is cause a very huge problem, danger to the society, or the security problem to the society. We believe we can meet this problem, and that is the reason why we're thinking about whether to give them the citizenship, which they can stay here permanently, or if we do not give them, they will have to leave our country someday, right? So we're thinking about a new problem to solve this current situation, and they're only demonizing the refugees in our country now. So that's why again they failed this debate. And also they talk about that they will eat up our tax. Right, because the refugees, they don't have decent job. They have to eating up our so-called eating up our tax. But that's why we're going to grant them a citizenship, and then they can be a decent worker of our country. They can be a very huge, powerful workforce of our country, and then our country's economy will be boosted again by those new blood of those new citizens of our country, which are formal refugees. So these are some rebuttals concerning some response concerning their previous speech. And then I'd like to clarify our model. So our Prime Minister only mentioned as examples saying we're going to check their criminal record, and this is not the only one. We're also going to check about their relations with others and something else in this sense to make sure that this person is safe in the first place as a refugee. And under these premises, we're going to make sure that they can be a decent citizens of our country. So this is a clarification of our model. So next I will talk about the security issues, and then I'll talk about why it is good to our country, to our citizens, and to the refugees. So in the first place, we believe those citizenship, those refugees who came to our country are good in the first place. Why that? Because as we can see, when they were, most of them currently we're talking about some no thank you. Some of them, they are in the Middle East. So they are under the oppression or the violent treatment of those ISIS or other dictatorship. And that's why we believe anyone do not want to leave their home country in the first place, and they have no choice. They have to come to a new country to make a new life. They don't have any other choice. That's why they came here. So in the first place, we believe they are all the good people who are under the oppression of those dictatorship or the demo or the ISIS in the first place. So that's why I believe they're good. They're good in the first place. And then, so first when we talk, as I mentioned just now, so when they come to our country, so we have we have a double check. Why that? In the first place, when they come to our country, like Japan, we have a very strict censorship or something to check that they do have a criminal background or the bad background. No, thank you. Or have a very really bad background, and then this is the first level of this check. And then, as mentioned, why do we ensure the security is because in the second level, in the first we have a strict censorship, and then in the second level, so once they want to become from a refugee to a citizenship, we have another censor or a check of their background to make sure that they are not only a qualified refugee, they're also a qualified citizen, right? So in this sense, we believe those citizenship, those newly become new citizens will be a decent and a safe force of our country and it's a new blood. Yes.
Last year, Japan only accepted 32 refugees total. Why are you advocating for citizenship instead of an asylum program? Why can't you let your friend that stays on your couch for a night or two just go back home? Why citizenship?
Exactly, so you mentioned the number 33, right? So in the first place, 33 is a very small number. This is not a huge threat to our country, right? So under this sense, and only some of them will become the citizen of our country. So the security problem is not issue in this paradigm, right? So it's a small number. And lastly, I'd like to tell you about why it is good to the country, to the citizens, and to the refugees. As I mentioned, in the first place, refugees are under oppression, and even though they come to our country, they're living in a very small camp, and they're under discrimination by others, by the local people. So they're living a really bad life, and that's why this will cause a potential crime. And if they become a citizen of our country, they will lead a better life. They have an access to the public welfare system, and they can live a better life. And that's why they can become a force. They can become decent workforce of our country, which is good to our country because we're now in the shortage of labor. And once we have those new laborers, workforce working for us, this will be also very good to our country in terms of financial, and also we can add in some new diversities of culture and economy. And that's why we are proud. What do we do? We are really. We're proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. In the first place, I want to ask the government side, what is the citizenship are you talking, and also what kind of benefit can both sides, original citizen and refugee can get, and also citizenships accompany the obligation. They after they get the citizenship, they also need to pay the tax and also following the old rule in these countries. Don't forget this point. And also, government says that they can go if they become the citizenship. Suddenly they can go to the hospital and also they can get the public service and so on. But in the first place, they don't have any enough money, and also they don't have stable jobs. But even if they can get those kind of welfare, and also even if we can pay them all welfare to all refugees, but refugees come to our countries suddenly, and also so many caused by so many refugees start getting the welfare at the same time. What will happen? Japan surely bankrupt. There is no social security. We just increase the number of refugees. Why we need to make a same mistake again and again? So we should not take this motion, and also we need to look at I want to look at what they said, that they failed to mention how they will solve the unemployment problem. Often government today simply think they will get a job simply by becoming a citizen, but it is not true. As I said before, they cannot speak our country language, and also they don't have any knowledge about our country, and also they cannot. Like that. And also, they said refugees are good and refugees are people. We admit they are people, yeah. But no basis. Even if they don't have a criminal record, how can we guarantee hungry and unemployed will not make any crimes, no security anymore in our countries? What our uniqueness is, we want to just say we need to consider all people in these countries, like Japanese citizen and also the refugee. But what we are saying, what we can say is Japanese can get their own way to save the refugees. So and let me think about after taking this round. Yes.
Could you be more specific about how, in other way, can we help those refugees?
I will explain later. It's okay. And I can say that as citizen score is enough. They develop knowledge, then become the proper citizens. So let me talk about after taking this prawns. After taking this prawns, we have two more conflict in our countries. First one is the government versus the original citizens. Japanese government versus Japanese citizens. after taking this from Japanese government just embarked refugee by giving citizenship, we cannot expect how many people will come, how much money we have to spend for them. But they just insist that we will invite them by giving the citizenship. And also, we need to think about the Japanese citizen. Now we have an unemployed problem also. Japan pension system looks almost bankrupt, and also Japanese citizens have to keep paying so much tax. So they have some ease to the Japanese government in the first place. But if we take this motion, their life will be totally changed and become the worst, as I said before. Because they said that if they can get the citizenship, they can get the welfare. It means like the welfare to the original Japanese citizen will be made a more literal one. So, and also we can, if we talk about the Japan, we need to think about the Japanese culture. So they are saying that very conservative and also they hesitate to interact with the foreigner in the first place. If we take this motion in those kind of country, what will happen? No, thank you. So, and second conflict is original citizen versus the refugees. Original, as I said before, refugees are also the humans, and they are coming to this country with hopes. Like they can get something like that, but if they cannot get some what they expect, or they just become the homeless or something, what will happen? What will happen? We can see those kinds of some accident in the German in the first place in this cross. I want to compare that which side can keep better which side can keep better social security. In the first place, what is a better social security in our countries? First, people who can live in the country safely and comfortably, and no terrorism and less crimes. Like that, we are aiming those kind of the social security. But today's government, opening government shows is what state is very vague. They don't know how many people will come, but they just give them citizenships. People cannot communicate with original citizens, and also so it means like they cannot communicate with original citizen means like making their own community, and they make the discounts between the original citizen and also like the refugees. So we can expect those kind of things easily. To think about these points, we should take our own way to support the refugees. Now, like giving the money, and also like checking them, and after that, after we know that they can be integrated our society, we can just invite them. And also now Japan provides some stuff to their refugee camp and something like that. So what we want to say is that we should consider all people in Japan are the governments. So what our uniqueness is just that considering all people which connected to these issues. So that's why opposition consists that insists so many times just giving the citizenship doesn't solve anything. We just make a conflict in our society, as I said before, like the government versus the original citizen and the original citizen versus the refugees. Even if we just give the citizenship and invite refugees, we just make a distance between the original citizen and refugees, and they can start the battle each other, and they cannot talk by themselves. They cannot negotiate anything about it. So like that. So we can expect those kind of crucial situation very easy. Why do we have to need this from in this society and now? We can. So we just brought opposing this motion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Next I have welcome member of Parliament.
Madam Speaker, despite all the material that the government opening have bring to you to compare the benefits and like the backlash of the refugees, opening hub is already failed to the closing hub. Why is that? Because they failed to answer very two fundamental questions of this debate. One, what exactly is the context of this debate? Two, why the government have the responsibility and have the justifications to give those refugees the citizenship, not to oppose or like to accept more refugees in the current situation. This debate is not about like whether or not government should accept refugees. So obviously, closing government gonna win this debate by answering these two questions. But before that, let's take a look at the opening operation size. I have two individual rebuttals. Other will be integrated in my speech. Number one, the leader of operation said in his speech that like just because like they come to your countries, because like they are involuntarily come to your countries, they cannot receive like normal citizens, right? That's totally discrimination to that kind of people. I highly recommend like opening operations to come home and like well check yourself, your moral obligations again, because your arguments, it's just like because that kind of people come to this kind of country because they cannot go anywhere. That's why they cannot receive human right to voice out, human right to to receive other kind of welfare system in the first place. So that's principally wrong in this debate. But number two, you talk about the backlash, you talk about the conflict between government and refugees. We talk about the conflicts between like the original citizens and refugees. But we can apply this kind of mechanisms to the immigrants in the current situations as well. We also have this kind of conflict with the immigrants as well. Why we don't like oppose the immigrants? We only oppose the refugees in the first place because the question here is that even if we take all of your materials, the government themselves have to compare and think like which kind of policies gonna bring benefit for them in the long term. That's why now even Japanese government is actively receiving immigrants. So we don't think that like refugees is anything different from those immigrants in the first place. So that's why even if you got this kind of backlash, considering the long-term benefits, still we take these policies. So, moving to our point, 2 points. Number one, what is exactly the context of the debate? It is not about Japan. The context of this debate is about the countries who already received refugees in a large number, as the opening government already said to you. When you come to that kind of context, the questions and the burden of proof for the government bench is like whether or not we just keep the status quo for them, or like we can grant them the better situations, and like why we can grant them the better situations. So our model for that is very simple. We consider that kind of refugee is similar to the immigrants, which means that like they can have the right to apply for the citizenship. They have to pass the test and they have to do everything just the same with the immigrant. They have the right to apply for that. No, thank you. So that is the context that we are debating about, not the narrowing down context of Japan's other opening operations bring out for use. Given you that context, why government have the moral obligations to do that? We have 3 main points here. Number one, why the current situation is unjust. It is not about whether or not they can get the jobs, or it's not about whether or not that's kind of thing harm for the citizens. Closing government see that is very principle. When you come to that country later, when you come to that countries as the refugees, you are being treated as the second-class citizens. And you know, you come to that country to work for that, to pay tax, but you don't have the right to vote, you don't have the right to bring out your own expressions. And more than that, the worst thing is that you cannot opt out that the immigrant comes and like for a long time, if they stay in Japan or they stay in European countries, they have the right to grant the citizenship. But refugees doesn't. Refugees stay to those countries and like they're just living as the second-class citizens forever. So we say it like that is very principally unjust in this debate. Opening, if you have anything. Okay, so closing.
To clarify, 5 speeches in, you're telling me you're remodeling the debate, so now it's not just Japan, but it's any country? Don't you think that's a little knifey?
The opening government in the first place doesn't mention anything about that, exclusively only in Japan. They mention basically the case coming from the European countries, but what operation side doing here, they trying to narrow down the scouting only to Japan. So you need to prove why only Japan, because not only Japan receive refugee in the current situation, right? Germany, other European as well. So end of that POI. More than that, what we're saying here that like they cannot opt out of like being treated like a second-class citizenship. That is the principle wrong in that kind of things. Why that is the moral obligations for the government to grant them that kind of thing? Because if they stay long enough in Japan, or they can stay long enough in that kind of countries, obviously they contribute something to your own countries. They can work as a labor force, or they can actually bring innovative, they have potential. They are human beings. They have potential to bring new ideas to your own countries, to like contribute to that's their own countries. You saying that like maybe like welfare gonna cost for them, that's fine. That can be considered as an investment for them, so that they can contribute and like can make more benefit for your own countries in the long term. That's why now Japanese people bring a lot of money to like invite immigrants in the first place. Same analysis for the refugees in the first place. So like that's why no thank you. So like that's why what is the clear distinguish between closing government and opening government is that like we don't consider about like the clear harm. We consider about the very principal case. That is they are being just normal citizens. Number two, they have potentials in both good way and bad way. They have potentials like to contribute for the whole society, and they also have potential to become a terrorism. Why is that? Because they are being discriminated in the whole society. They are being hated, they are being marginalized by that kind of citizens. Because now they don't have the legal right. Even if like after granted citizenship, to some extent they still keep being discriminated. But now they have the right to voice out. They have the right to go to the court and sue the people who actually insulting them in the first place. So very principally, granting them that kind of thing to make sure like the potential of them will not go to the bad way, but rather than that they go to the good way, which is like they contribute more and have to incentivize to contribute more for that society in the first place. But last but not least, what is more important and why government have to do that? Because it's about the next generations. When you consider what we should teach for our own children, should we teach them that like we just physically accept some kind of people who are now vulnerable, or we teach them that we have fully accept them and like welcome them with an open hand and like give them all chance as a normal humans in the first place? Ask yourself the questions. You're totally gonna work for closing governments. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the refugee is not immigrant, right? Refugee is something should be protected as government. Refugee should be provided with something minimum standard of living, right? Even they have no capacity, even they have no ability to do. Having that, two clarifications exist. Firstly, how we treat them, right? Of course, we cannot provide them the very warm or perfect, convenient services, but still, we already guarantee the minimum standard of living for them. As some people should be protected as refugee, right? In having that, we think the status quo problem provided by the opening government doesn't exist in the first place. Secondly, who is the exclusive actor? Of course, the exclusive actor is the refugee who are not capable to speak languages or access to the services, because if they are capable, they already pass the test, pass the original test, and they can get the very citizenship by their own. That is to say, the exclusive actors should be the people who are not capable to access the very languages, education, or services. And having that, we think that giving the citizenship for them is rather counterproductive. And as a state, we should not this kind of granting should not be justified. From the closing opposition extension is this motion will be harmful even for the refugee. That is a very clear extension. But before we move on, simple reward towards the whole of government side. Firstly, the opening government talked about they can citizenship and they can have access to the school and they can opt out from the poverty, right, kind of things. But this is not true, because as I have said, they are not capable to know about or understand education, right? They can go to the school maybe, but they cannot understand what teachers are saying or those kind of things, right? They will never opt out of poverty. They will never be the citizen in literature, right? Secondly, they said more crime will be lessened because of the citizenship, but this is not true, right? Because in the status quo, they are refugees. Some people should be protected. In that cases, if they commit a crime, the social stigma on them or some social criticism on them can happen. And after that, many nations or government decided we will not accept this refugee anymore, or those kind of things can happen. That is the reason why there are some deterrents for the refugees not to commit a crime. But after taking this plan, they will be citizens, right? Even they have committed a crime, there are no effect on the refugees, right? Governmental policy. In that cases, there are no deterrence power, and rather we think that they have the incentive to commit a crime. Why is that? For example, in Japan, homeless people actively, deliberately commit a crime, because they think the prison is the more comfortable than the homeless, right? Same logic will apply to the refugees, right? Some refugees fail to have the home and have to access to the food. Then they will commit a crime and they will be arrested. They will go into the prison, and they think this is a very better than the current living. No, thank you. This kind of very malicious intention can happen. Secondly, about the closing opposition. This is not only closing opposition. The closing opposition and opening opposition said we will enforce a test or checking system. But we think this could benefit from their side of the house, because they said this motion is very necessary for the refugee people, and very basically important for the refugee people. But at the same time, they said some people cannot access to these systems because they will check, they will test, they enforce a test. That is to say, they will implicitly consider this benefit is not so important. Even some people cannot access to this benefit. This is not so much. It's okay for them, right? That is very committing suicide, right? Secondly, the previous speaker has said terrorism is happening in the status quo because of discrimination. Assumption of this argumentation, after taking this plan, discrimination cannot be happen. But look at the very example, right? For example, Germany, French, or England, right? There are many discrimination that's occurring everywhere on the refugees. In that cases, I can't understand why after taking this plan, discrimination is magically removed and many people will not go into tourism or kind of things, right? That kind of things should be explained. Go.
They will be discriminated anyway because they are already refugees. Do we have any other better plan to make sure that they won't be discriminated against in current situation as a refugee? Thank you.
Okay, this kind of utopia doesn't happen. This is a very argumentation from outside the house. Extension from outside the house, this motion will be very refugees harm. And moreover, this is the only excuse of the government to throw out the obligation to protect the refugees. That is a very important extension. Mr. Speaker, the refugee is some people regarded should be protected without any kind of the ability or for free. But we have to notice that regarding citizenship, that is to say, they already citizens, they no longer refugees. Just equally, they no longer target of the protection of the government. In that cases, we think they only abandon the obligation to protect the citizenship by using the very clean word of citizenship, right? But this is a very bad thing. Because why is that? Because even they get the citizenship, it doesn't mean they can be the citizen literally. Because as I have said, many people are not capable to access to the education. Many people cannot access to the very services because they cannot understand some languages, because some people cannot listening to what the very public servants are saying, right? This kind of problem does exist. That is to say, even some people regarded the citizenship itself, it automatically doesn't mean they can access the whole of services or those kind of things. And moreover, considering this, we think status quo is very better than that kind of situation. Because in the status quo, of course, we cannot provide the very, very comfortable situation, but still we provide the very basic thing. For example, camp, for example, food, for example, clothes, right? These kind of things are provided in the status quo. But what we do after taking this plan is even some refugees say, sorry, I don't have money or I don't have house. Many governments say, hey, you are no longer refugees, right? You have citizens. You have to get those kind of things by their own, right? You have to go to the public servants. You have to access to the service by their own. These kind of things, this kind of situation will happen, and government support is no longer free for them. That is the reason why this is very problematic. They only throw us the obligation to protect the refugees by using the clean word or citizenship. And the second problem is social disparity or kind of things, right? After taking this plan, of course, the many refugees who are not capable going to the society. In that cases, unfortunately, some people have the very bad images on them, or some people think they are very we are not same as me, or those kind of things, right? Having that, if if we regard them as a refugee, still that kind of thing doesn't happen. But at the moment we regard them as a citizenship, the same citizen or other nations will have the very bad images, unfortunately, on them, and that leads to the very social disparity on them. Having that, what we are saying is status quo is not perfect, but still very good thing for not only for the citizens but also for refugees. They only throw us the very important obligation to protect the refugees by using citizenship. For this reason, this right should not be regarded. Thank you.
Because the moral character of one dying man is more valuable than the selfish and destructive character of 100 thriving citizens, this House will give refugee citizenship. When making a decision in today's debate, you should question the moral compass of the opposition and ask where their fear of those in need will take Japan. Think of the rhetoric they have used, of criminals, of worthless, of not good enough, and ask yourself which side of the House makes the ethical decision in today's debate. The role of the government is to make practical and principled decisions that lead the nation down the road to justice. But justice does not care about where you were born, but it does question how we live. The life the government, our side of the House, has planned for Japan is one based on legal rights for those with no place to go and no place to return to. But think about the vitriol, the rhetoric that you've heard, the kind of conservative forces at work here that are being okay with a group of second-class citizens living amongst Japanese people. The fact that that kind of conservatism is what has killed the Japanese economy, what has stopped you from competing around the world, the same thing that stopped America from competing around the world, from innovating, from pushing Japan forward. Now, that might be, an interesting nuance, right? It might seem like it's essentializing what they've said, but think about it. They haven't debated the paperwork you give to immigrants, that you give to refugees. They've literally debated the refugees themselves. They've told you that those people are not valuable, they're not important, they are not good, and never have the chance to be. Now, the government has two defenses of why the paperwork you give to refugees is valuable and should be citizenship. The first, principled, the second, pragmatic. The first one is second-class citizenship.
Before that, sir?
The second one will be innovation, but I hear dissent.
On that ethics and justice, prove why being unemployed and being hungry is better than eating 3 meals per day in jail.
I have no idea why refugees automatically go to jail, and I have no idea why they would increase the crime rate. This is the conservatism that has distracted you inside opposition from doing what is right. Now, on to second-class citizenship and then to innovation. First, second-class citizenship is not good, and it is disappointing that Team Opposition's justification for rejecting refugees is because they will never be good enough, not because they have actually ever done anything. Their solution to crime, which we've heard in their speeches, is to turn their back on people because they might, maybe, possibly, one day become criminals. Their solution to a lack of education is to deny refugees the legal right to make the government acknowledge a growing population without access to education. But we've heard maybe asylum, but we've heard, oh, they're going to let everyone in. But we've heard everything except for one straightforward argument about why refugees are actually bad. Why refugees getting citizenship is harmful. But the thing you did hear is that they want their tax money. They want them to do cheap labor. They want them to continue in these trainee programs that are here in Japan that are the same thing as slavery. Now, taxation, no representation, and calling them dirty, criminal, crime rate increasing, bad forces. It sounds very familiar. Now, we talked about this a couple times today, but I think this is really an opening to the window of the moral character of Team Opposition, right? And it sounds kind of like who I did not vote for, but our president, Donald Trump. Now, I wonder if you gave them a Twitter what they would say. Because we've only been here for an hour and they've said quite a lot. The second thing that's important is innovation. Now, you've heard from us about what the value of people are, the value of introducing new people into the Japanese economy, the value of ideas, of competition, right? Japan can innovate past the problem of terrorism, which we have not actually heard them respond to. Now, it's not just Japan. Now, we have explained to you that although we think that there's a very good reason why Japan should give citizenship, today's defense, the motion that this House would defend is a global one. Because ethics, again, does not care about where you are born, but it does care about where you live. We consider all lives equally valuable, not based on some random hierarchy, not based on some predetermined notions of what we think about people before we even meet them. There are plenty of places around the world where it is really important to stop creating anti-American, anti-European, fill-in-the-blank sentiment. Because we say that their unwashed or their huddled masses are all of the things you've heard today. What can solve that, however, is bringing people into the fold of inclusiveness, of inclusion, of an ethic of care that only this side of the house has provided you a framework for today. Now, we think terrorism comes from a world where you treat people like this, right? The terrorist attacks in London, the terrorist attacks in France, the terrorist attacks in America. What do these three places have in common? If you go to France, they have a term for inside and outside the walls. Guess who lives in the walls? Guess who lives outside? If you go to school in France, or you go to school in London, you won't see any brown women or any other women with a hijab. Because not only do the police beat most of them up, they also tell them you are not welcome unless you live a certain life. This is a global phenomenon, right? Not only principally, right, do we have an ethical framework that resolves that, but practically, we have explained to you the way forward for Japan. Now, I don't want you to think that this is just about justice. You should remember the need for innovation, the need to include more people, not just for their tax money, but because you find them valuable as human beings themselves. There's nothing really to say other than I'll wait for your next tweet.
I'm very thankful for the opportunity to follow Eli in today's debate because I think he makes a very strong rhetorical move, which in many ways strawmans every argument we hear out of our side. We are not here today to tell you to ignore those in need. We're here today to tell you to listen to those in need. And we believe that when we look at refugees specifically, they would be more harmed by citizenship than receiving other aid or asylum in other countries. So we're going to break that down very slowly by asking 3 questions in order to summarize today's debate. The first of which is why citizenship? Because it's critical to understanding today's motion and understanding what needs we are able to meet and how we inadvertently harm others through our actions by a lack of understanding. 2, who best solves for security? This is referring to both the security of the individual nation and the security of those who we choose to let into the nation. Finally, 3, what do refugees want? This is a direct answer to Eli's call to be ethical, to not only choose not to ignore individuals, but what we say is if you want to truly look at an individual, it shouldn't matter where they're born, But what should matter the most is choosing to listen to their voice. And if their voice says, we don't need citizenship, we just need a place to stay, we just need a couch to sleep on, we just need food and services, then you should give that to them instead of creating an opportunity, not yet, instead of creating an opportunity that would cause societal backlash so that these same people are further demonized. We want to help them, and this is going to be best accomplished on this side of the house. I'll let you know when. So, why citizenship? First, we want to give a little bit of love to our top half because we think the top half did a great job showing you the pragmatic or the practical side of today's debate. They directly answer the two arguments coming out of the opening government, which is this idea of social access and how individuals need these programs. First, they show us that these programs can be accessed to non-citizens, which is currently what's happening in many other places. But secondly, they show us that the added stress of giving citizenship to all of these individuals would make it so that not only could these refugees not receive proper access to social goods like healthcare, education, food assistance, etc., but it would make it so that Japanese citizens would not be able to receive the same amount of care too, because it would tank the economy in ways that are simply not sustainable. Though this is a consequentialist argument, it's rooted in ethics, it's rooted in the obligation that a government has to care for all of those who claim to be citizens. We could see everyone being let down through this policy. But secondly, we learn this idea of how we should be pragmatic or practical about ideas how to lower rates of terrorism, how to lower rates of ISIS recruits. What we get, though, out of our top half is that when individuals are angry that their government can no longer provide services that are guaranteed to these individuals, we see that this is how social disparity is created, which is what my partner tells you. This social disparity, when individuals are put in and become essentially second-class citizens because there's not a sustainable way for their government to care, this is detrimental in today's debate because this is when people get angry. This is where we can look at populations like Sweden, which has let in such a large amount of immigrants that they, one, cannot help the immigrants learn the language, so they never interact with the Swedish population, but two, these people are living in slums because they can no longer be afforded the same rights as other citizens. This means that this is when people get angry, that this is how terrorism begins to bubble up and grow because it's grounded in a difference. It's grounded in what is believed and perceived to be racism. We think that this is important to look at in today's debate. But secondly, this launches into our argument about who solves for security, right? Before I continue, Eli?
When did you take a poll of refugees and hear that they would rather be in Syria being bombed than in the ghetto?
We're not telling them that they have to go back to Syria. We're saying that you can offer asylum in a country and offer them certain social goods without saying you need to become a citizen. Look at the Zainichi, the Korean population that's been here since 1945 in Japan that doesn't want to become citizens because they don't want to give up their dual citizenship. Instead, they want to be able to access social goods. They still pay taxes, but they don't want to be coerced into taking a citizenship that they don't want. Don't create this false dichotomy that takes away the voices of those who are those individuals who are hurting the most. That's what we're saying. So who solves for security? What CG shows you is the potential of individuals. They can be great assets to society, but when we overburden a system, we create this social disparity. This social disparity makes people angry. We can't pretend that just when you grant someone citizenship paperwork that they suddenly understand the language, that they can receive the same high-powered jobs. If you don't know the language, you go to a low-skilled job. You make less money. You live in a less nice neighborhood. You live in that slum. Slums like this are existing in the US. They exist across Europe. We don't want them to exist in Japan. Because if we do this, we only continue a cycle of poverty that, again, harms these individuals. We don't think that the government should dole out paperwork and write a blank check for promises they can't keep. We think that granting asylum in the short term means that they can best provide financially in order to get these people back on their feet so they can go where they want to go, not be coerced into taking a position or taking a citizenship that they maybe don't want. So finally, that leads us into my last question. What do refugees want? Because we think that this is the only way to ethically address this question. We believe that a society that inadvertently creates second-class citizens through a program that can no longer provide for their citizens, that allows for social disparity to exist, we think we have to listen to these people that are asking for help. We're thinking they're not asking for citizenship, right? I mean, the 32 people that were granted citizenship and that were willing to play by the harsh standards of what it means to be Japanese and want to integrate into that culture, great, that's fine. But for the rest of the masses, they just want a place to stay. If you want to say that this house only exists in Japan, fine. We have shown you up and down the bench how citizenship in Japan would inadvertently hurt these people. If you want to say it's the entire world, fine. Our logic still applies. At the end of the day, honorable chair and members of the audience, what have I told you? I've told you the only way to ethically engage with refugees is to listen to them and to give them what they want. At the end of the day, citizenship is not necessarily what they want. Should we turn away the huddled masses? No. But should we make sure that the governments can, one, care individually for their people first and foremost, two, extend that same offer to refugees? Hell yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your speech, thank you for your cooperation.
I feel like before I say anything, I should stand up here and look at my paper for a really long time. Because that seemed to be what everyone did at the start of a VP speech. I feel out of place by speaking right away. I thought this was an excellent debate, and one of the things I'd like to focus on today are 3 things that I think, in particular in this format, become important if you want to be a successful VP debater, but that can also translate into other formats. So regardless of which type of debate you do, I'd like to give some comments that can help in all formats. The first is what we saw in today's debate, is the importance of definition and of explaining your reasoning. And this is especially important in parliamentary style debates or in British Parliament, because we saw in today's debate, was this debate about global refugees or was it about Japanese refugees? What does it mean to apply for citizenship? These are things that were defined at some points in the debate, but not at other points in the debate. And you could see the places where it both created confusion when folks were unsure what we were debating about, but also created some really good clash when those definitions were clear and we knew what the debate was about. So things like, what is a refugee? What qualifies? Is it someone that applies for refugee? Is someone who is a refugee the same as an immigrant? What makes them different? What is the nature and purpose of asylum? These are all some ways to think about how to define an argument, because the way that we define refugee, the way that we define this house in this particular motion, the way that we define grant citizenship, is it give them access to the same process of citizens, or is it to grant that citizenship immediately? These make the debate very different, and that becomes very important for the top half to make sure to establish that. And similarly, for the bottom half, it becomes really important to develop reasoning, to make sure that not only are they making their own arguments, but they are extending and evolving the arguments from the top half. And that's true in all formats of debate, but it's especially true in British parliamentary debate, where the debaters need to say, this is what our top half did, now here's how we are making that a little bit better, here's why that is good. Because if it seems too different or too distinct, then it's not the side of the House that's making an argument, it becomes the individual speaker. So part of the importance of role fulfillment in British Parliament is to make sure you're developing earlier arguments in addition to making your own. And that's true in all formats. If you're giving your final rebuttal, it is important to extend arguments that your partner has made. That it's not your own individual speech that you're making, but you're as part of a team. So we saw the importance of that in the debate that I thought was both done very well by both sides, and both sides could have improved. The second thing that I think is very important is the importance of a weighing mechanism. That there were a lot of different arguments in this debate. So what becomes really important, what I tell my debaters is I say, never let the audience think for themselves. And what I mean by that is, if you let the audience decide what's important, they might agree with you, or they might not. Right? So you're taking a risk in saying, is the thing that I think is important the same thing the audience thinks is important? And what becomes important in debate is to say, there might be a lot of things we all agree on. Which one is the most important for this particular motion? And so we might all agree, for example,
that helping people is really important, that we have an ethical obligation to help people. We might also agree that the government has an obligation to its citizens. When those two things come into conflict, how do we resolve those, for example? So in this debate, we saw a couple of weighing mechanisms. We saw what is more important, principled arguments or pragmatic arguments. And you saw that both sides in their final whip speeches actually said we can do both. But one side focused more on principled arguments, one side focused more on pragmatic arguments. And one weighing mechanism that they both did, you'll notice, is what the government side said principled arguments are the important ways to make pragmatic arguments, whereas the opposition said pragmatic arguments are the best way to make principled arguments. Right? So that was a good weighing mechanism. That gave you very clear clash in the debate to say which side are we going to decide on. And that's true in all debate formats. You have to tell the judge how to evaluate the debate. You have to say these are the things that are important. Because you might assume they agree with you, and they might, but that doesn't tell them how they compare your arguments to the other side or to the other side of the house. And I thought that was done very well today. The third thing is the importance of points of information. Some folks in this debate were jumping up like their seats were too hot. Like it burned them to stay seated for an entire speech. Whereas other folks stood up once or not at all during the debate. So it becomes very important to rise for points of information, because even if the other side doesn't take them, it reminds the judge that you are still involved in the debate. It helps them see you as a member of the debate. And then once they get answered, a POI is very important, because in other formats like policy debate, where there's cross-examinations or an HENDA, you use the questions to set up your next speech. In parliamentary debate, you can use the POI to redirect the focus of the current speech. So if you asked a good question, you can force the person answering your question to identify what they think is important about your argument. And that becomes really useful because you can get a preview of their summary speeches. Right? So if you say, what do you think about this about refugees? And you hear how they answer, then you know your partner needs to address that argument. So you can use the point of information to not only change the argument the speaker is making, but to get a sense of where that debate might develop so your own partner can make a more effective argument. And I thought that was done really well a couple of times in this debate, where there were very strategic points that said, is this debate about the refugees themselves? Or is this debate about the granting of citizenship to the refugees? Yes, you have this good policy, but if you can't help these people, what good is your empty ethical action? So the POI also keeps your arguments in the mind of the judges, and then it helps you do those other things more effectively. It helps you give a good weighing mechanism, and it also helps you establish the reasons for why you should win the debate at the end. So with that, I think we should give everyone another round of applause for their outstanding British parliamentary debate. Thank you so much for coming out to join us tonight.
From now, I would like to provide you a piece of sheet and please write down the best thing you think and best letter you think. And opening government, and opening opposition, closing government, and closing opposition.
So the best thing and the best speaker.
How about the best speaker?
Or best thing and best speaker.
Just one.
Yeah, just one.
So we're just writing down one team.
One team
Okay.
and one speaker. One
So-
best.
And the speaker doesn't have to be from the team.
Yeah.
So who overall the whole debate was the best speaker and which was the best debate?
And please speak to me when you get out of this room. Then I will announce the result in the party. Yeah. だからちょうど4枚余ってるけど。
Write my name.
Okay, let me officially close the event. Thank you very much, all of you.